Hello and welcome to Crossing Borders with Nathan Lustig, where I have conversations with entrepreneurs doing business across borders and the people who support them, with a special focus on Latin America. My guest today is Antonio Nunes, a Portuguese entrepreneur who has lived his life across borders. After studying in Portugal and Denmark, he started an NGO to support entrepreneurs in Mozambique, which is still up and running today. After running out of money personally, he returned to the traditional consulting path until he met Oliver Samwer, one of the co-founders of Rocket Internet, the German company builder. He joined up and crossed borders again, landing in Asia, and worked from a Starbucks to build a fashion e-commerce startup that quickly grew to more than 500 employees, and today has more than $1 billion in revenue. He was interested in Latin America and moved to Colombia to co-found Linion, Rocket Internet's answer to Amazon in Spanish-speaking Latin America, and helped it expand all across the region. After working there for 3 years, he took what he learned and focused on the grocery delivery business and co-founded Mercadoni from a 3-bedroom apartment with his starting team of 4 people living there and built the business. After raising funding from venture capitalists, a traditional retail group, a finance firm, and Brazilian tech giant Mobile, he and his team continue to expand across Latin America. We cover all this and more, including why Latin America is changing quickly, why last mile delivery is a better business in Latin America than the US or Europe, and what he's learned in his journey doing business across borders. Please enjoy my conversation with Antonio Nunes. Hello, Antonio. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Nathan. Nice to be here.
Yeah, thanks for being willing to do it. So where are you in the world today?
So today I'm in Bogota.
Very nice. And what are you working on in Bogota?
So in Bogota, we are growing Mercadoni. Mercadoni is an app that basically allows customers to buy from the major grocery stores in their cities at the store price and get their products in 1 hour or whenever they want it. So we basically operate the largest cities in Spanish-speaking LatAm, which is Bogota and the largest cities in Colombia. We also operate in Argentina and Mexico.
Awesome. And for people that are maybe not in LatAm, what are some of the other businesses that are like you guys outside of LatAm, maybe in the US or somewhere else?
Yeah, so I mean, in the US, you'd probably look at a company like Instacart or Shipt. They would have somehow a similar model. We make sense of that model for Latin America.
Perfect. And how long ago did you get started?
So we started in Q3 2015, towards the end of 2015.
And what made you decide to work on this idea rather than any of the other big problems that are in Latin America?
Yeah, so I usually like to work in things that excite me and things that are problems for myself as well. And actually, both myself and my co-founder at Mercadoni, we had a huge problem, which was we never had food at home. We're always either working or excited about things that we're doing outside of work, be traveling, be learning, being out with friends. We just never had things. And we realized that this is actually not just a problem of ours. It was a problem of pretty much anyone living in a city. That going to the supermarket is boring. It wastes a lot of time. For the average family, they actually waste 4 hours a week going to the supermarket. And the problem was even bigger in Latin America, where there's huge traffic, there's little retail penetration, so there aren't as many stores as you'd have in the US or in Europe where I'm from. So the problem is even bigger. And we realized that, what if we just build an app, we build a platform that allows people to fulfill the same need of having food and basic supermarket stuff inside their home in an easy, very convenient way without having to spend 4 hours a week. So that's kind of what excited us to start it. And we realized that, this sounds like a very exciting idea. It's something that's not just us, it's something that's relevant for everyone. So we may actually end up solving a big problem and building a big company in the process.
So you talked about traffic. Can you give people who aren't from Latin America a sense of what it's like to either commute or even just do something as simple as going to the store in a city like Bogota or Mexico City?
Yes. So, actually, LatAm cities, they are among top cities by ways in terms of traffic. The normal people, the average person can actually commute 1.5 hours just to get to work, 1.5 hours again to go back home. It's a product of cities that grew very fast with not so thorough planning. So basically, you end up spending a lot of time going anywhere in the city. Apart from the traffic problems, there's also sort of for a long time there were security issues. That's not the case anymore. But also, it's not always great to go out in LatAm cities. So people actually are somehow used to also ordering stuff or doing a lot of things in the house.
Yeah. Now I can look at I know Santiago, Chile, the best of any of those cities, but where big percentage of the people will be on public transport for an hour and a half easily each way, just like you would in LA or in New York to come into the main parts of the city to get stuff done. So probably the last thing you want to do is spend another, like you said, 4 hours per week out at the supermarket.
Absolutely.
So we'll dig into Mercadoni more in a little bit, but I wanted to jump back. So you've taken an interesting path to Colombia. Where are you from originally?
So originally, I'm Portuguese. I was born in Portugal. I studied in Denmark. I left living in Europe to actually start an NGO. So I started an NGO when I was 19 in Mozambique, actually working with entrepreneurs as well. And basically, at the time, I was in this moment, getting out of university, very excited to do something that could change the world. And at the time, entrepreneurship wasn't something big. I didn't have much context with California. But I had this idea that if people that were wanting to start companies, they had something. They had something about wanting to change stuff, and these were people that if they were born in Mozambique or in Angola or wherever it was, they shouldn't have a tougher time starting their businesses. And if they did, those businesses would help the community and would help their country move forward. So we started this NGO that basically helped entrepreneurs build their businesses, from structuring the business to getting them access to resources about management or about the specific business they're working on. We also launched a branch around financing those businesses, which went from small company financing to microfinance. Basically, after that, I actually went back to Europe and I started working for a consulting firm. Actually, I run out of money in my NGO, so we had to go back. The NGO is still out there and it's running in 3 countries, but I personally was out of money, so I had to go back to Europe. And at the time, I started working for McKinsey. I didn't really know. I didn't really want to be a consultant, but I knew that I wanted to just get a bit of exposure to sort of like companies into the corporate world, and that I could meet some smart people. So I basically went there. I was working in Europe and in Asia for a while, and basically after 2 years, I ended up meeting a guy called Oliver Samwer, which may have the people hearing this podcast may know, which was a guy that at the time he had started many companies. He had started a marketplace, eBay type in Europe. He had sold it back to eBay. He had built a mobile content, a $300 million mobile content company, and he was starting also many companies, many online companies around the world at that moment. So I thought, okay, this sounds fun. I didn't know much about entrepreneurship, but I liked the idea of starting stuff. So I basically quit and I joined him, building these internet companies in different places. So I first went to, I get on a plane and I go to Sydney. And in Sydney, I basically get told, hey, we're going to start an online fashion e-commerce. I didn't know anything about e-commerce. I didn't know anything about fashion. I still don't know anything about fashion. I know a bit more about e-commerce now. But we basically start this company, an online fashion e-commerce. Think a bit of Zappos, maybe in a US context. Grow the company. Then I moved to Singapore. In Singapore, we also started our online fashion e-commerce. That company is called Zalora. Right now it's a company around $1 billion of yearly sales. It's quite big. It's operating in 7 markets in Spanish in Southeast Asia. And basically, I get there alone, working out of a Starbucks with this idea of building a online fashion retailer. Without a very clear idea of what fashion was, but basically bringing the first people to the company that could help me build it up. So basically, that company was. Sorry, go ahead.
So Rocket has a pretty unique strategy of getting a company off the ground, where you mentioned they just sort of dump you in a Starbucks with a plan and say, go execute. Can you talk a little bit about that process and what you learned from it?
Yeah, I think it was a fantastic experience in terms of learning how to build a digital business. I mean, you end up having, exactly as you said, a broad idea, sort of like a big ambition into making it big, and sort of funds to execute it for the beginning. And what you end up doing is basically just learning a lot about execution, how you build a commercial team, how you build an operations team, how you build a marketing team, how technology works in a very short period of time. So in a short period of time, you get exposed to a few dozens of other people also starting online business in different parts of the world, and you end up being able to connect with entrepreneurs that are having similar challenges as you are having, or entrepreneurs that had the same challenge and now are 3-4 years down the road. So you end up learning much faster. I think I spent with Rocket 3 years. I think I learned probably the same as someone would learn in 20 years or 30 years. It's definitely very intense, but definitely huge learning.
And you definitely are typifying this podcast by crossing lots and lots of borders between the NGO and then the Rocket experience in Asia, and then now Latin America. What made you want to explore outside of Portugal or even just Europe and look at all these different places and do business there?
Yeah. I think in general, like I always liked different places, different stuff. I don't know, but sort of like the same way that most of my colleagues, like when I graduated in 2009, and in 2009 in Portugal, nobody was talking about technology companies, nobody was talking about startups. But I kind of was always excited to try different stuff. I think I also liked to look outside Portugal. That sounded exciting at the time. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. There's been a few Portuguese entrepreneurs that I've met from Startup Chile that had fairly similar experiences, where they went and studied in a different country for a couple of years doing university, and then ended up leaving and doing something else. Do you think that that's something that is in the Portuguese culture, or something that is unique to entrepreneurs in Portugal, or just sort of the luck of the draw?
Yeah, I think it's two things, right? Like in Portugal, we are kind of like the small country at the tip of Europe that, if you talk about it with any Portuguese, he's going to tell you about like the national history and sort of like how the geographic position of Portugal creates you a situation where you want to go outside, you want to explore. Maybe that helps sort of like creating national conscience of wanting to go outside, both being a small country and sort of like being on the tip of Europe. That definitely helps.
Yeah, and so I was interested in the NGO as well that you talked about. What did your family and friends think when you decided, after graduating, instead of going into a more traditional finance or consulting, big business type track, that you decided to go and start an NGO in looks like most of the Portuguese speaking places around the world?
Yeah. I think first they thought I was crazy. They didn't understand it. I think I was in school. I was a relatively good student. I was on a good track. And I think they always saw me with big ambitions of wanting to do things big. But I think as they started seeing the project taking form, that there were backers, there were people that were willing to finance it, that it actually made sense, that it would have an impact. it kind of, everybody started understanding, oh wow, I actually wish I had done this.
And so you've now raised money for an NGO and then also some traditional businesses, some startups. Is that process similar? And if so, how is it similar and how is it different?
I think it's quite similar in the sense that, I mean, for us, the way I've always approached fundraising is there's kind of three things that I've always done in no matter what context, be it for an NGO or be it for a startup, which is one, really know your stuff. So basically investing a lot of time in knowing the numbers, knowing the company, having a very decent vision of where you want to go, and kind of find a way to articulate that in a way that people understand in a very detailed way. So that's kind of the same. The second thing is for me, I'm not a naturally outgoing person, and I'm not necessarily, by default, super well connected. So for me, it comes out of preparation. It comes out of being very, very thorough about, what are all the options? What are all the guys I can raise money from, both for an NGO or for a startup, for whatever it is. And I think the third one is sort of like force myself to network through those target lists and sort of like get connections through those people. That's kind of the same between, you can be doing an NGO, you can be doing a startup. For me, it's always been the same. I think what's very different is that, for NGOs, it's a lot more emotional. It's a lot about, telling a story of emotion, and sort of like exploring also personal links with the person that you're trying to fundraise from. So for example, you can do it from alumni, from your university, and kind of like the storytelling is much more emotional, while for the startup it's much more rational, and sort of why can someone make a business out of this.
No, that makes sense. And so what lessons did you learn from the NGO that you use in your time at Rocket or even today with Mercadoni?
Yeah, I think the first one was around team, and surround yourself with great people that you like working with. When we did that for the NGO, I kind of tried to find what's some great people in this university and in the city in Lisbon that are excited about this project, and that can really help me pull this through. Actually, more than that are excited about it, was like people that can help me do it, and then I'll get them excited. But also like not only like great people, but also people I actually enjoy working with. So when you do a startup or when you do an NGO or whatever project it is, you end up spending a lot of time on it. You just need to invest a lot of time so that it actually works out. So it's not only enough that people are great, they actually need to be likable, and you need to enjoy spending some time with them because you're going to spend a lot of time with them. So I definitely took that away. I think the second thing was kind of like be ambitious in execution. So kind of always force yourself to execute a lot, even when it's hard. It sounds difficult. It sounds difficult to, when you're out of Portugal and you need to go to Mozambique, which is very, very far away, a different continent, and you're 19. For you to take that decision, you really need to force yourself to do something that's going to be hard and that you have very limited information about how it's going to look like. I think I definitely took that away as well. And a part of that is, I guess, be willing to accept the risk. Have a clear view on where you want to go, but also accept the risk that is going to go along the way. A part of that you also take when you do startups.
No, that makes sense. And so you landed in Asia and with this mandate to build a fashion brand. What happened next, and what took you to Latin America?
So basically, I lived in Singapore for 9 months. We scaled the company from being myself alone in a Starbucks to being roughly 500 people working on the company across 7 countries at the time. And at the time, I was starting to think, where do I want to live? Where am I on a personal level happy? And I just didn't like living in Asia at the time. I always wanted to live in Latin America. It's something that from when I was a child, pretty much, I wanted to move to Latin America. And at the time, within the Rockets investors context, they started talking about building an Amazon for Latin America. Um, and that sounded very exciting because it was a huge business. It was exactly in the geography where I wanted to be. It was starting again a company from scratch. So I basically take on the project, and I found Linion in Colombia. This was in 2012. Moved to Colombia then. Then in Linion, as we expanded to different countries, so we expanded into Colombia, Mexico, Peru, Venezuela, Chile, Ecuador, Panama. Kind of as we do that, we also centralize different functions. So we centralize technology in Mexico, we centralize marketing and data science, and I moved to Mexico to lead growth in marketing for Latin America. So I was then living in Mexico, leading the marketing and data science team for the region. Basically, after that, the process was we keep scaling the company. We scaled the company to more than 1,000 employees. We expanded to these different countries. We go through the process of kind of learning what marketing channels work, what marketing channels don't work. And as we were going through this process, both myself and my current co-founder in Mercadoni, we started understanding that there's actually an opportunity that is potentially bigger, very, very interesting, that we want to do on ourselves, that we want to do now without rocket backing, and fully take on this opportunity. We started understanding that people in Latin America, they're transacting more and more online for hard goods categories. We started understanding that they're more and more willing to use apps for transportations, things like Uber, like Cabify. Also, that they're more and more transacting for restaurant delivery, to order stuff and get them in their houses. And we see that there's this huge retail category worth $300 billion, which is groceries, in Spanish-speaking LatAm alone, that nobody's looking at. That supermarkets, one here and there, kind of try to move online and do a good job in building an e-commerce operation. But they weren't really fundamentally solving users' problems, and they weren't really building a product that people were wanting to use. So we this together with sort of like how we felt the problem ourselves of never having food in the fridge. We decided to leave and focus 100% on Mercadoni, on launching it towards the end of 2015, and that's sort of like that's kind of like where the story of Mercadoni starts.
And so I had a couple questions about the Linio period and also coming to LatAm before we jump into Mercadoni. But so you speak Portuguese, obviously, being from Portugal. Why Spanish-speaking LatAm, not Brazil?
So initially it was kind of circumstantial. So just because when Rocket was starting Linio, they wanted to focus on markets that had less competition. In Brazil at the time, there was already Submarino, there was B2W, there were big companies already doing it. So it didn't make sense to start it there. So I kind of ended up landing in Colombia a bit by accident, I guess.
Interesting. And so was there, why Colombia to start rather than, say, Mexico, since it's the biggest market in the region? What was the thinking behind that?
So when you at the time, so this was in beginning of 2012. So when you looked at the market then, you kind of saw. So you saw in Brazil there was B2W, there was Submarino. You looked in Argentina, there was Mercado Libre, which was very strong. And then there were, when you look into the rest of LatAm, you kind of are left with Mexico, with Colombia, with Peru. These are kind of like the largest countries next. If you take out Chile, that had some other market circumstances for not going there in the beginning. So kind of like, and these ended up being the first countries where we launched the company. So we launched it in Colombia and in Mexico, kind of in parallel. I came to Colombia because there was already someone actually working in Mexico at the time. So I just like logistics ended up coming here first.
Interesting. So, tell me a little bit about what it's like to live and work in Colombia. What's the lifestyle like, and what's the business culture like?
Yeah. Um, so so Bogota is a city that it's a bustling city. It's a city that there's 10 million people living here. And one of the things that surprises me more about Bogota is the rate of change. Is how you actually see the city changing each month, each year. When I first came here in 2012, I kind of, in terms of lifestyle, I didn't like it a lot. I mean, there were a few restaurants, there were a few things to do, but there weren't many things. There were a lot of things being constructed at the time. The difference from that time to now is dramatic. You see the difference in what you can do in free time. Going sort of like things like restaurant opportunities or cultural activities. Huge change from to things like new buildings sprawling in the city, to things like new companies coming up, startups starting. I mean, 2012, very things were happening here. That was how I felt when I first got here. Now you see multiple different companies that are moving in the online space, that have good teams going after problems, that are doing good, that are expanding to other countries. Big change.
Yeah, I saw the same thing from 2010 in Chile. And I think sort of that inflection point was probably around 2014, where you really started to see the influx of new restaurants that could easily be in New York City by looking at their design. If you didn't hear everyone speaking Spanish outside, new types of industries, startups getting much better. And one of the things I like to talk about is the inflection point that's happening in Latin America right now. And you touched on it. What do you think is the cause of all this change? Why is Latin America able to change so much faster than places like the U.S. or Europe that seem to go a lot slower?
I think there's a leapfrogging effect in Latin America. I think you see the same in other emerging economies in Asia. I think in Asia it happened before. I think in Latin America it's kind of happening now. And the way I like to think about it is with phones. So I kind of have this mental idea of phones in Europe and in the US. We kind of went through this phase of having landlines, and then there was huge infrastructure projects where you start investing a lot on sort of like having landlines everywhere. Then you kind of go into cell phones, and the cell phones first without any any cameras, anything. Like this was kind of early 90s, and now like phones, smartphones with internet that can do everything. So what we see in Latin America is that there were no landlines, that there were basically no phone landlines, there were no cell phones without camera. There was these huge amount of people, all these hundreds of million people that live in Latin America that go straight from having nothing to having a smartphone. So you end up having a big middle class when it didn't exist, and it's starting to exist now, and it's going from nothing to from having no services to having the same service and the same products done online. I think that's a bit kind of what's happening. Then you obviously see in many of the countries macroeconomic trends of countries growing with some sort of level of stability. We definitely see that in Colombia. I think in Chile probably something similar as well. And people, as the macroeconomics are developing, middle class growing, people getting access to services for the first time on their smartphones, first transacting with simple things like ordering an Uber or using Facebook, to sort of like more complicated transaction types also happening online.
Yeah, it's that leap is really interesting, and one of the ones that we focus on at Magma is in fintech, where I'm pretty convinced that the 70 to 80% of people that are not well served by the financial industry and traditional banks in LatAm will likely jump ahead of that and go into a lot of fintech companies, sort of like what happened in China. Do you see other industries that that leap is happening in?
Um, well, I don't have a deep perspective on it at this point. I see it as a kind of broad thing, but nothing in specific.
One of the funny ones that I use sort of as a proxy for the economic development in the countries as they're taking off is when I first got to Chile, everybody had braces. Everyone was getting
Mm-hmm.
their teeth straightened. And I think that happened in Colombia like 2014, 15, when you go back again and everybody's got braces and is getting all the orthodontic work happening. And you're just seeing it in all the different places in the country where, or in the region where you've got finance happening, you've got restaurants, you've got people fixing their teeth. It's just all sort of happening fast, which I think is really interesting for the ecosystem.
I see two things. I see actually one which is in families' behavior, which is, everybody having a home, getting a credit and getting a home. Which is, it's an old phenomenon in the US and Europe. In Latin America, I think it's a relatively recent one. Like, a lot of people are being able to access credit and buying a home. There's a second one which I like even better, which is the taxi, which is the taxi moment. So whenever I get into a city, the first thing I do is I get out of the airport and I look at how the taxi driver behaves. And I think it's a very good proxy for how everybody in a city behaves. And when you get into Bogota, and you see this in multiple Latin American cities, your taxi driver he's going to have a smartphone, he's going to have a tablet connected to the internet. In both of them, he's going to have a different taxi hailing app. And he's going to be using them. And I think it's a very good, it's kind of a stupid exercise that I always do, and gives me a good sense on how digital the average population is.
Yeah, no, that's a good example, especially remembering some of my early taxi experiences in Latin America, where you just had to hope that their taxi meter wasn't rigged, and if you did notice it being rigged, that they wouldn't get mad, and as happened to me in Chile in like 2014, smack you with a stick if you complain. Now with all the hailing apps, it's pretty much taken care of.
Yeah, definitely agree.
So let's jump into Mercadoni. So you had a really good job where had a lot of stability with Rocket and Linion. How did you make the decision to make the jump and start your own thing where you took on a lot more risk?
Yeah, I think the first one was we really see a huge opportunity, and we really saw the chance to solve a problem that affected a lot of people. And that by itself is something that's very motivating. I think the second one was we wanted to be able to control strategy ourselves better. So we wanted to be able to create our own culture. We wanted to be able to fully control strategy and say, hey, this is actually how we think we should be attacking this opportunity. So I think kind of, opportunity size, independence in strategy making and building your own culture were probably the main reasons behind it.
And what did people at Linio or friends and family think when you were breaking away and taking this risk again?
I think I mean some were sad because they weren't. I wasn't working with them anymore. I'd like to think this was a big group of people. I think my friends. They were probably like a bit. Worried. What's he going to do? What is it why is he taking this much risk? But again, I think as with the time when I started this NGO long ago, they understood it was a project that made sense. It was a big opportunity. And once you kind of get the chance to explain, hey, this is the opportunity I'm going after, and this is what I want to achieve. People are supportive and they understand that it makes a lot of sense.
So this is an industry pretty much everywhere in the world, whether US, LatAm, India, other places in Asia, that has required big amounts of venture capital to make it work. How did you guys approach fundraising?
That's an interesting question. So the first thing we did was actually when we started the company, we had savings from our previous projects and jobs before. So we were the seed funding for the company, and we basically took every single penny we had. So all the money I had, even the furniture I had, my co-founder, he had a car, so we sold everything. We put all the money in Mercadoni, and we decided this is all in. And we decided to focus 100% on it, and that was our seed funding. And then, with this, we launched the company. We took, we lost the first months. We grew the company to the first sort of being proven in having a very good traction. And then we had to raise an external seed round. We needed at the time $2 million for the next stage of the company. At the time in Colombia, there were only two VC funds operating. We hadn't done fundraising in the region before, so we didn't have good connections outside Colombia. So we basically, for the first round, we took one of those funds to work with us. Then we kept growing the company, kept expanding the company, launched new markets, launched Mexico, launched Argentina. And we needed a bigger round. And you're right. I mean, in Latin America, there isn't a as mature VC industry as you'd have in the US, and especially when you're looking for bigger rounds, rounds bigger than $3, $4, $5 million. There aren't many options. So we kind of had to be creative. And we ended up, we ended up raising a round that was $9 million. And if you look at it, we ended up getting, different investors there that come from, I'd say, kind of creative backgrounds, but also that for our specific business add a lot of value to what we're doing. So one of our largest investors that came in is actually one of the biggest financial players in Argentina. Typically don't invest that much in technology, but they're a big financial investor in Argentina. We were moving to Argentina. We wanted a strong local player. They ended up joining us as a very, very relevant investors. The second one was, we are a technology company, but we are a technology company focused on helping retailers go online. So we were also looking into who can we find connected to the retail space that can help us build this company, that can be smart thinking about retails, that can be smart thinking about how supermarkets work and have worked for the past dozens of years. So we ended up bringing on board a big financial group that was connected to the retail industry and that helps us think about how does a supermarket actually work. And the third investor actually is an international technology investor, which is Mobile, which is from the Naspers group. It's a group that, Naspers internationally, they are the largest individual shareholder in WeChat. They have multiple internet companies, OLX, also multiple in Europe, and it kind of made a lot of sense as someone with a technology background supporting us. But overall, I would say you kind of have to open up and be creative on where you find investors to help you grow your company.
Yeah, so for people who are interested in learning more about Mobile, check out the episode I did with Fabricio Bloisi, the CEO and founder of Mobile. I think it was episode somewhere in the 30s. So definitely check that out. It's a really interesting story. So you raised from very disparate investors. You had retail, you had finance group, you had a big tech company. Did your pitch have to change for each individual investor, and what did you learn from that fundraise?
We had to change pitch. I think the story is the same, and always the way that we approach fundraising is this is the big vision. This is what we believe about the market, and we want as investors people that can believe the same vision. So in terms of what's the big thing that we're going after, it's the same. It's what we're working on every day. I guess we had to adjust what we told, which parts of the business where some people wanted to go more in detail than others. So, for example, Movil was very, very interested into the details of how we did technology and how our technology and product team worked. They were very interested in how we did online marketing, which online marketing were more efficient. While for our investor that is related to the retail space, it was more about having a very, very in-depth understanding of how a partnership with a retailer is going to work, what is going to be the future of your interaction with a supermarket chain, and what's the implications of that for the operation. So same big vision, different angles of the business that you go more in depth with each of them.
Interesting. So with Mercadoni, you sold all your furniture and put that into your savings to get the company off the ground. Can you walk me through what your first steps were when you were first getting started to start building the company into what it is today?
Yeah, definitely. So the first thing we had to do was actually to validate that there was interest from retailers. So when you think about our business, for our business to work, we need to partner with retailers. They are the ones that have inventory, that have products, that have prices, that have all those negotiations inside the stores. You need to have personal shoppers. So these are the guys that go to the store, pick up the item, and deliver it to you in less than 1 hour. So we had to kind of validate that these two big building blocks made sense. So for the retailers, we basically got a meeting with the CEOs of retail companies that were willing to receive us. So basically, went to them with a pitch. This is what we're going to build. We weren't that sure we wanted to build it at the time yet, but this is what we're going to build. Are you interested or not? And there was a huge, immensely positive response by them. We're super interested. We want to go online. We've had so many issues in moving online. We want to do it. So with this, we validated the first part of the company. Retailers are willing to work with us. The second one was kind of understanding, can we convince people to actually go into these deliveries for us? So this part was kind of easier. So we just went a bit around trying to understand who was doing deliveries right now. How do we need to change the profile of these people to get the deliveries done? And we said, okay, there's people willing to deliver. So basic building blocks of the business, they make sense. Next step, let's get a team. So we start going through our network, understanding who are the greatest people that we know, and start pitching them. So start telling them, hey, this is what we're going to build. This is the opportunity. This is how we want to do it, and I wanted to join. So we basically bring the first few people into the team, and we started working initially out of a little house. It was the house where basically myself, my co-founder, the now CEO of the company, and the CTO were living. 3-bedroom house, 4 people living there. Basically, after a month, we were 15 people working there every day. It was kind of nasty. It was kind of very kind of dirty, like too many people in one space. People sleeping few hours, working long hours in the same house, closed. The company starts growing. We go online relatively quickly. In less than 2 months, we're online with the first version of the product, and the company starts growing. So we started investing my savings from my furniture and my co-founder's car. A bit in the first marketing, start growing the company. Users are liking it. Users are repeating it. We started building the first traction of the company, and then we raised our first round in the beginning of 2016. That was $2 million. With that, we basically keep expanding retail offering. Start working with more stores. Expand to more cities, expand to Mexico, expand to Argentina towards the end of 2016, and basically keep growing the company. 2017, towards the end of the year, new fundraising round, expand to a couple more cities in Colombia, and that's where we are right now.
And so can you talk a little bit about the how many people are using it, what kind of orders you get, what's the most popular type of delivery item that your clients like, stuff like that.
Sure. So right now, there's more than 500,000 users of Mercadoni across 6 different cities. We have right now a network of personal shoppers of 2,000 people. So there's 2,000 people whose monthly income depends on our business, existing in delivering groceries. People, usually people order their weekly grocery purchase. There's people that actually use this for, hey, I want to actually have items from a specific retailer that is far from my house and I don't want to go there. But the vast majority of people fully replaced the going to the supermarket by us. So they're buying 30 items on their order, going from packaged CPG items for your house to fresh items. Actually, some of the out of the top 10 items that are sold in Mercadoni, 8 are fresh items. So in the top 10, you find things like bananas, tomatoes, lettuce, milk, even meat. Meat is one of the top 10. And actually, this was something that, looking into what we sell, makes us very happy about fulfilling our mission of bringing to your home the things that you'd buy in the supermarket, because people are fully buying the things that are relevant for them to buy in the supermarket, even the ones that are complicated to do. It's very complicated to make sure that you get the right bananas, that you get the right avocados, that you get the right ripeness in vegetables and fruits. And we invest a lot of resources and a lot of time in making sure that your personal shopper, your piloto, is trained into doing it perfectly. So it's good to see that actually that gets reflected into what we actually sell and what customers want from us.
And so I've heard a lot of people looking at the delivery industry speculating that Latin America might be a better region for this type of business than the US. Do you agree with that? And if so, why?
I 200% agree that Latin America is a much better market than the US or Europe to do this business. And there's reasons both from a demand side and from a fundamental unit economics perspective. I think this is an amazing region for this business model. So from the demand side, it's a bit what I was telling you about. People are used to having traffic, that it takes a long time to go everywhere, and there used to be security problems. So an offline delivery culture already exists. You don't need to teach people to get things in their home. People are used to calling a restaurant to get stuff delivered to their home. People are used to calling their neighborhood store and getting, the butter or the olive oil delivered to their house. That's already part of their behavior. So from the fundamental, the barrier of adoption is lower. You just need to convince people to do whatever they're doing offline through an app. The second one, which is actually even more important, is the fundamental unit economics. So the cost of getting items delivered in Latin America is quite low. So while in Latin America you can get deliveries done at around $1.5 to $2 per hour in terms of the cost of the staff working on it. In the US, the exact same service, 1 hour of delivery people costs $15 to $20. And this means that if you're looking at delivering $40 of food to someone, in the US, it costs a lot as a percent of that food that you're delivering to people. And someone needs to pay for it. It can be either the retail industry or it can be the customer, but someone needs to pay for it. And in the end, if the cost of that being very low, if you tell customers it's going to cost you $2 to get something delivered to your house in 1 hour, that's an amazing value proposition. If that thing costs $15 or $10, that's a lot of money. So that makes the model very, very interesting for this part of the world.
And so one of the things that has been, I would say, probably the major battle in Latin America tech over the last, say, year, where a lot of money has gone into it, is this industry with Rappi, Corner Shop, Glovo, and you guys all sort of taking different stabs at the market, but also all kind of looking at last mile delivery. Why do you think that is, and how does it feel to be in a market with three other big competitors?
Mhm. Um, so in general, places where you have a lot of competitors are the interesting places to be. Are places where there's a big opportunity and where there's a lot of money to be made. It does mean that you need to step up your game. It doesn't need that you need to make sure that you're executing very well. But overall, it's a great validation that this is a very, very interesting space to be in. And having said that, I mean, with most of our competitors, we have fundamentally different approaches into how we look at the market and where the opportunity actually is. With some, it's more of a geographical perspective of where to play. With others, it's a very fundamental, different view of where the market is going. But in general, you're right. It's a very, very exciting market to be in.
And one of the things that I saw in my background research and before this was you said that, and I maybe misquote you a little bit, but that the future of e-commerce in Latin America is stuff that's delivered in, say, an hour or 2 hours rather than, 3 to 5 days. Can you expand on that and share your vision for what you think e-commerce looks like in the future in Latin America?
Mm-hmm. I think let me sort of break that answer into two parts. I think one part is like e-commerce in general, and the second one is sort of like groceries. I think that in terms of e-commerce, it's very, very clear that all categories are going to go online. I don't see any exception to this. It's very clear that from products to services, most things will just move online. Latin America is not different than anywhere else. It's probably going to go faster because there's some leapfrogging, as we talked a while back. So that's pretty clear. I think that there's a big share of people that will want things delivered very, very cheap without necessarily caring that it is same day. I think that there's some other amount of people that will want things same day and are willing to pay a bit more for that. Within the category of groceries, which is where we're very focused, which is a very, very big category, there's a big chunk of the market which is focused on same day delivery. People expect a big chunk of people expect same day delivery. And even more than that, what we see is that people really care about when they get it. In our category, it matters that if you say you want something at 8 a.m., you get it at 8 a.m. If you're like in your office in the morning, you're thinking about what you want to get in your house by night, you say you want something by 7 to 8 p.m., it's going to be there at 7 to 8 p.m. So in our category, being able to allow precision in deliveries and the same day delivery is very important in this part of the world. It also goes with kind of what people are used to already in the delivery space. When I think about what's going to happen with groceries in Latin America going forward, I do see that a big amount of people will just not be willing to waste 4 hours a week going to the supermarket, going through traffic, going through inefficient checkout process in the cashiers. And a big chunk of them will want to save that time to things that are much more value added, be it work on something you're excited about, be it to develop skills, to travel, to whatever. And the route to that, from our perspective, will pass by allowing retailers and people that customers are already used to purchasing from to move online with a seamless experience, with a great platform, with a great service, with the right marketing channels and customer understanding to do that. Right now, like a lot of this industry goes with delivery staff going to the store picking items. we see very clearly that in the midterm, this is going to migrate to dark stores. So imagine supermarkets that have no customers and only exist to do fulfillment for a delivery service. That's going to be a big part of the future. We also see CPG brands coming closer to platforms like us as part of the ecosystem. We definitely see that there's a lot around customer understanding and how you anticipate customer needs. A lot of work to be done here to just build the future of this going and having groceries in your house.
Yeah, it's a really interesting market, and I'm very interested to see how it develops. I just want to end here with the last couple questions that I like to ask most people as we finish up. And so, what books, blogs, podcasts, documentaries, any sort of media would you recommend to other people, or do you recommend to other people that help you understand the world or look at the world?
Mm-hmm. I usually so I kind of have a couple of different broad interests. And I usually in all these categories, there's kind of three themes that I'm interested in. One is I'm always interested in stories of entrepreneurs. So the second one is I'm personally very passionate about history and anthropology. So I read on those themes. And I also typically like a bit of literature from wherever I am. So, I mean, in terms of like podcasts, I actually usually hear for economics. I study economics, so I kind of like to think about how incentives affect the way people act, and it's kind of fun, and it's a good podcast in that theme. On books, I'm actually now reading a book which is called. Can I quote books?
Yeah, please do.
Okay. I'm actually reading a book now which is called Guns, Steel, and Germs. So it's around history and sort of like understanding how humanity became to be what it is. It goes with my personal interest in history. And on documentaries, there's one documentary that I like to see on a very different topic, which is called Abstract. You can watch it on Netflix. It's just very visually stimulating, completely different topic, nothing to do with any of what we talked about today. But kind of inspires me creatively, so I like to watch it.
Yeah, Guns, Germs, and Steel is a great book. I think you might enjoy checking out 1491 and 1493, which are two books about what the world was like just before Columbus came to the New World. It goes pretty deep into LatAm stuff. If you haven't checked that out, you'd probably enjoy it.
Good suggestions. Thank you.
So what advice would you give to yourself if you could go back in time to when you started Mercadoni, knowing what you know today?
I think one of the things that I would have done differently would be so I think first one is I would have started sooner. I would have quit my jobs before faster and started more companies before. Definitely, I would have done that. I think I invest a lot of time on getting tools to where I am right now, but I think I could have done it faster, and that would have been something helpful. Second thing is I would have probably advised myself to bring more senior grade people faster. I think that in our history we were always nimble with cash. We were always trying to save as much cash as possible and constrain the company in cash, to try to sort of like only spend whenever there's absolutely no other option. But I think more earlier than later, investing in great talent helps a lot, especially when you are in competitive industries where you have a bigger time pressure to move your product to a different stage. So I would probably have done that earlier than what we ended up doing. And the third one was probably being take fundraising seriously. I think we didn't have any fundraising experience, and we kind of looked at it as, hey, like let's just focus on building a great business, and the rest will come through as we need it. The truth is, in Latin America, you need to be more proactive and probably spend more time on it than you would elsewhere, because there's less options. So I would probably have worked harder in fundraising from the beginning as well.
Well, I think that's really interesting advice, and I really appreciate you taking the time to share your journey and your perspective with me and the audience. It's a really fun conversation, so thanks for doing it.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks again for listening to this episode of Crossing Borders. Please reach out to Antonio and me on social media or via email if you enjoyed this podcast or have any questions. We'd love to hear from you. Please remember to share Crossing Borders with a friend, as it's the only way we really grow, and we really appreciate it every time you do. Thanks to Angel and Sophia for all your help producing this podcast, and thanks to all of you who listen and continue to support Crossing Borders. Hope you all have a great rest of your day. Thanks again for listening.